My story is very nondescript. It begins in Bridgeport, Connecticut, October 21st, 1959. And I'll save you the math. I'm 64 years old, which sounds weird in and of itself. And at that point, as Cynthia said, at 5 years of age, we moved from Connecticut to Southern Vermont. My mother, my stepfather, and myself. They had bought a hunting cabin, basically, and 100 acres in 1965 for $6,500. Yeah, on a dirt road, very rural. Grew up with pigs, that I used to slop with 2 5-gallon pails of slop in the morning before I went to school. Cows, 2-acre garden. I picked more green beans. I hated green beans because you could pick them in the morning, and in the afternoon, you'd have to pick them again. But it was a Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer type of existence, completely different. And I've since found through past life regression that I've lived many lives like that, where I've gone from a rural or a urban existence to a very rural existence, or from a rural to an urban. I've done that in many, many lives. Anyway, I grew up on the slopes of Stratton Mountain. So those of you that are skiers, you'll know where that is. At 6 years of age, I started skiing. School used to let out on Tuesdays at 12 o'clock. The bus would come get those of us at the school and take us up to go skiing. We had a 3-room schoolhouse, grades 1 through 4 in one room, 5 through 8 in the other. Mrs. Rowley, who was the teacher for grades 1 through 4, was the best teacher I've ever had. She controlled that classroom. No more than 40 to 50 kids in the school at any one time, but it was a great existence. In 1972, my mother and stepfather divorced. My mother and I moved back down to Connecticut, and I moved in with my grandmother into a 2-bedroom apartment. Talk about a style change. And from there, as Cynthia also said, 12 days out of high school, I joined the Navy. I served 6 years. And about 3 years into my enlistment, I got stationed in Philadelphia. Met my wife, and that's a whole other synchronicity story there of how we met. It's an improbable situation. But we ended up getting married in September of 1982. We had a baby in our oldest son in March of 83. Don't do the math there. Okay, from September to March. Good. That's good to hear. And I didn't grow up seeing spirit. I didn't have really any idea of that. Although I did grow up with a very firm belief in the afterlife. I don't know why. I never had any personal experience with it, but I just always believed. I knew it. The only experience that I had right after 1983 was my grandmother had passed away in May of 83, 1 month before I got out of the service. And her and I were very close. In June of 84, about a year later, she came to me in a dream. And we know when a visitation happens because you never, ever forget it. You remember every detail. So we're talking 4 years ago, and I still remember every detail. And the long story short, she just hugged me and she said, everything's going to be okay. And I started bawling like a baby and saying, I'm sorry. And the only thing I could say that I think that I was saying I was sorry for was any time I may have hurt her by saying something. I also had a very good friend of mine, Tommy Gallagher, in the Navy. And like I said, I got out in 83. He stayed in, re-enlisted, and he got stationed down in Pensacola, Florida. So in September of 84, we were keeping in contact, and he was living off base. And I called him in September of 84, the phone was disconnected. And I thought, okay, no big deal. He probably left his apartment and went back to the ship. He'll get a hold of me. Fast forward to Christmas Eve, 1984, still living in Philadelphia at that time. And I was in the house by myself, and I was kneeling down, wrapping a present for my wife. And all of a sudden, I sat up and I said, he's dead. And I was absolutely positive of it. I knew he had gone. And to the point where I started getting emotional. My wife, Nancy, came in. She knew Tommy. And she's like, what's the matter? I said, Tommy's dead. She goes, how do you know? I said, I don't know. I just know. And I had a number for him. He was from Montana, and I had a number for him. And I called, but I already knew what the answer was going to be. It didn't matter who it was that was going to pick that phone up. I knew what the answer was going to be. And it ultimately turned out to be his sister. I told her who I was, why I was calling. There was silence on the other end. I said, here it comes. She said, I'm sorry, Tommy passed away in a car accident in September. So right around the time that I tried to get a hold of her. So you fast forward to October or January of '86, my second son was born. And again, nothing eventful, nondescript, working hard, family, trying to get ahead. And in 1990, January of 1990, we moved to Langhorne, where we currently reside. Got involved with a number of different things, very successful in various avenues. There's always an A-type personality, right? Which I've now learned is something that I need to squelch, putting it nicely. And everything was good. Fast forward to November of 2010, and our oldest son passed away, 27 years old. And it's still emotional, right? But the valleys aren't quite as frequent. You get new traditions and things like that, but the hurt is always there. It's always there. The only way I can describe it is it's a hole in your heart. It scabs over, but it never heals. And I always tell people when I do readings for them, I don't profess to stand here and say, well, this is how you get over, it's a terrible phrase.
Yeah.
But I do think this is how, two things that you have to have in order to try to go on living. And one is you have to have a high belief in the afterlife. You have to believe that one day we will reunite, right? And I believe that more than the sun coming up in the east, because the earth could go filter, the sun could stop shining, whatever. We will go there. The second thing is you have to accept that hurt that is in your heart is now with you, and it's part of you. It's like a right arm or a left leg. You have to come to terms with that. You're never going to be the same. But the one thing that they tell us over and over and over again, they want us to live, right? Because it's important. We don't necessarily understand that being on this side, but once we go over, we understand how important it is. Excuse me. So anyway, things started happening right away. My mother and brother had come down from Connecticut, and I was walking by, we were at the, after the funeral get together, and I was walking around, and we're going home, and my brother pulled the car up, mother gets in, then she says, now remember, watch for pennies. Now my mother was told many, many years ago, previous to that, that from a medium, that she could do what that medium does. But she chose not to go down that path. But she said, watch for pennies, Mom. Now I got 1,000 things on my mind at this point, right? Okay, Mom, yeah, okay. So she gets in the car, go in, settle up, come out. And what's right down at the driver's side door is a penny. And I see it, and I just shook my head, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? I pick it up, right? Get in, go home. And things started happening. Within a couple days later, my granddaughter, who was 8 years old at the time, Mike's daughter, was over the house. And it got rather late, and she said to my wife, Grammy, I'm gonna go up, let's go up to bed and think of better times. This is an 8-year-old saying, So they went up, she fell asleep, my wife came back down. And hour, 2 hours later, whatever, she goes, I think I'm gonna sleep with Kylie tonight. I said, okay. So fast forward to the morning, I get up, I'm up early. She comes down, I said, how'd you sleep? And she says, well, I had a kiss from my son. And I said, what? She said, John, I was laying there last night when I went up, and I was getting emotional. And all of a sudden, I felt a kiss on my cheek, And he had a mustache and a goatee.
Okay.
And she said, I could feel
Yeah.
his whispers. Okay. All right. About an hour later, my granddaughter comes down. I said, how'd you sleep, honey? She goes, Pop, last night I was laying in bed after Grammy. I woke up and Grammy had gone. And all of a sudden, my sheets started getting pulled up. I said, really? And she goes, and then Daddy kissed me on the cheek. Right? If you're not getting goosebumps now, I don't know what's going to get it. And I'm like, really? I said, well, how do you know it was Daddy? She goes, I could feel his beard right here. Now, there's no way that she heard what my wife said. This was not something where she overheard it. She's 8 years old. I'm like, wow. Okay, well, here we go. In the midst of all of this, I had a little sheet of paper with the name Teresa Robe on it, with her telephone number. Those of you that know Teresa.
Yeah.
And for 5 years, I had that on my desk prior to my son passing. And every time I cleaned off my desk, I would grab it and go to throw it out, and I'd be like, I'll keep it, And it just stayed on my desk. And we end up going to see her a month after Mike passed, in a gallery reading in Ben Salem on Street Road at the old what used to be the Holiday Inn. He came through, and at a break, I walked up to her and I said, Teresa, I'm John, blah, blah, blah. I said, is it unusual for somebody to come through so quickly after passing? And she stood there and she went like this and made a motion with her hand that he used to do. And she goes, he's standing right here and he says he's done this a lot. And I said, what do you mean he's done this a lot? He goes, he's come back and forth a lot. Like he's an old soul. He's been. And she looks at me and she goes, I wouldn't be surprised if you two were brothers in a previous life. We've since found out we were brothers in previous lives, and we've done this 13 times, the last 13 lives. In conjunction with all of that, I had a very good friend of ours that had lost her daughter in February of 2005. And she started talking to me about table tipping, right? She said, my aunt does it. She's unbelievable. And okay. She said, we should get together. We could. She said, I can't do it myself, but I think with me, you, and Nance, we could do this. Okay. Never got together. Our son passes. Well, now I got a reason, right? Got a chance to talk to my son. Yeah. So we get together, and sure enough, her daughter came through who had passed, and our son came through, and I was hooked. Never with the intention of doing this publicly, speaking publicly, doing it for anybody else. It wasn't like I was praying to the Lord to say, please let me, get a communication with my son. And I just started doing it myself, just strictly for myself. Couldn't raise the table, wasn't getting anything psychically, I had to raise it myself. It was pathetic. It really was. And it was like, I would ask a question, a yes or no question, and a table would ever slightly, and I'm like, did that move? Or did, I don't know, hoping it was. But it started getting, as the years went on, it started getting stronger. In May of 2011, we went on a retreat that Teresa used to do down at the shore. And that was the first time I did it publicly for people. Teresa encouraged me to break out the table and do it for, everybody who was at the shore at that time. And that was the first time. And from that point on, she invited my wife and I to go down to her retreats. And in her words, I was her closer for the week. Because I would do it on Thursday nights and Friday nights, break it up. And so it was something, and Brenda was at one of those, the first time I ever did it. And I was reluctant. Okay, I'm used to speaking in front of people. I'm used to, talking to people and the many things that I've done over my life. But I was nervous because obviously this is a totally different situation, right? Like I'm going to try to bring through somebody who's passed, like seriously. But it worked. From there, it just, again, kept growing and growing. In 2013, I had a very strange experience where I felt like I needed to go up. I used to work third shift. So it wasn't uncommon for me to go and take a nap. So I decided to go up to my bedroom, but I felt like I needed to sleep on my stomach, which I never did. I'm a side sleep. Laid on my stomach, fall asleep, and all of a sudden, I'm in a dream, laying in my bed on my stomach. And here comes this energy. It's the only way I could describe it. It was like a vortex, a violent vortex. And it came into my body and it just whooshed through me like this. It was so violent that it was scary. I mean, I tightened up, I tensed up in my dream, right? I'm tensing up. And for whatever reason, I said, help me, Padre Pio. I barely knew who Padre Pio was, only through Teresa, because it's so prominent in her life. Didn't know anything else about him, but for some reason in the dream, I called out to him. He all of a sudden showed up on the left-hand side. He took my hand, he said, it's okay, relax. And I relaxed. And that energy just kept going through me, back and forth, back and forth. Didn't know I have any idea at the time what was going on, but I've since found out that that was a vibrational frequency alignment they were doing on this. Mm-hmm. Fast forward a little bit more, and I do a guided meditation, meeting your archangel. Again, I go up to my bedroom, I'm laying there, this woman comes on, and the whole bit of like, you're walking down the path, the birds are singing, the brook is gurgling, the whole bit. Come to an archway, walk through that, comes up on this house. It's a little stone cabin, and starts describing the home. Well, in my meditations, I often go to a home that she was describing. It was exactly the house that I used to think of. I would think of it in my meditations. So I go inside. There's the fireplace, 2 chairs facing, one facing the fireplace. I go over to the far one. I sit there. A couple minutes later, now she had stopped talking at this point. So all of this was just playing in my mind. Here comes my spirit guide, Shalandra. He comes in, I recognize him. He sits across from me, and behind him is this figure, very tall, thin, long white hair, robe, rope sash, and I couldn't tell whether it was female or male. I was going back and forth on it. And I started getting this A-sounding name, but I couldn't get anything more than that. Comes over, sits down, we all sit there. All of a sudden turns to me, hands me a book. Nondescript, just some design on the outside. Didn't have an urge to open it or read it or anything. I think it was probably them showing me a book that I've been working on for about 50 years now. And then we sat there some more. And then all of a sudden, this entity turned to me again and said one word: patience. Something that I've not been trying to work on. As a matter of fact, my intention was to that. Anyway, turned back around and then got up and left, and that was it, right? I came out of it, and the first word I got was Ariel. Right? I was familiar with the name Archangel Ariel, but I knew nothing beyond that. Look up, okay. Can come through as male or female. Right? And also, I don't know how many of you know that Archangel Ariel is the patron saint of psychics. I've since had interactions with Ariel a number of times, and as well as Jesus, 2 times on the table and 2 times through meditation. So there's a plan in place here, and I'm just along for the ride. I've learned that I'm not driving his car. I'm just in the passenger seat. Certain things I got to do, right? When they put things in front of me, like I got to make the effort to come to Circle of Miracles, right? But beyond that, they have a plan. And one of the things they did come to me about a few years ago was to put together a team of people to do a 1-day event, soul retreat, we call it, right? So Teresa's part of that. We've since become extremely good friends, and we've lived many lives together. More stories, and it's just grown from there. Again, I didn't ask for this, but I'm grateful that it happened. People ask me all the time, well, Any hesitation, any doubt, no, I've been training for this all my life. I realize now all of the things I did in the past were preparing me for this. And I'm embracing it 100% as best I can. It's been a heck of a ride so far. Brenda can attest to some of the things that have happened, which are pretty incredible, synchronicity wise. And here I am.